Dear colleagues, welcome to our presentation, Gender in Contemporary Advertising Discourse. It's a great pleasure to participate in the 9th Conference for Critical Approaches to Discourse Analysis Across Disciplines, jointly organized by University of Bergamo and Birmingham University and hosted by the University of Bergamo in Italy. First, I'd like to briefly present our research team. My name is Anna, and I'm a postdoctoral research associate and senior lecturer in linguistics at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. Elisabeth, Andrea, and Nadia are students of English who attended my seminar, Discourse Analysis, Ideology and Identity, in the summer semester 2021. Their final project focused on the representation and interrelation of masculinity, femininity, power and dominance in advertising discourse. We decided to continue analyzing the concept of gender in contemporary advertising and formed a research team in October 2021. Today we are presenting the results of our collaboration. On the slide you can also see our current projects and research interests. This is an overview of today's talk. We'll begin by introducing a critical perspective on contemporary advertising discourse and providing a brief overview of current research on masculinity and femininity. We'll then present the methods and design of the corpus of posters collected for the study. Next, we'll present the results of the COCA analysis, which includes collocational and concordance analysis. The major focus of our study is the discussion of 5 discursive techniques employed in the representation of masculinity in modern advertising. In the final slides, we'll provide you with some concluding points and a list of references. The economic and social systems of capitalism have engendered promotional culture and advertising. Simpson does not regard advertising as a separate entity, but rather as a part of a global marketing strategy. The economy and the commodity market exert a profound influence upon various aspects of our lives. The capitalism of the 21st century is characterized by the attribution of value to commodities, both ideological value and market value. The economy is ultimately designed for profit and is expected to generate profit. The early decades of the 20th century saw the emergence of a brand of consumerism that arose from a complex set of economic, technological, and cultural conditions. Consumerism is a product of mature capitalism. Fairclough defines consumerism as, quote, a property of modern capitalism which involves a shift in ideological focus from economic production to economic consumption and an unprecedented level of impingement by the economy on people's life, end of quote. Following Habermas, Fairclough defines advertising as strategic, as it's primarily oriented towards achieving goals, in contrast to communicative discourse, which is oriented towards reaching an understanding between participants. Fairclough goes even further by arguing that advertising exhibits decolonizing tendencies, namely that discourses of consumerism have colonized other discourses, or at least expanded at their expense. Since advertising always has to make use of other discourses, the question arises as to what extent advertising is a discourse on its own right. Cook even labels this discourse parasitic, as it can only exist through other discourses. So no other discourse seems to change as quickly as this one. Advertising therefore needs to adapt to changes both in society and in the corresponding discourses in which it is inserted. Societal norms regarding stereotypical masculinity and femininity are often communicated through commercials. In contemporary consumer culture, gender is still commonly reduced to a dichotomous variable that distinguishes between male and female or masculine and feminine. Interestingly, there has been considerably less research on the representation of man and masculinity in advertising, largely because man's role in society have historically been viewed as unproblematic. Studies from the 1970s found that traditional female roles are associated with subordination, domestication, youth, passiveness, dependency, and sexual objectification, while masculinity is connected with professionalism, authority, independence, middle age, practicability, heterosexuality, and anti-femininity. While the social and political change in the 20th century has led to a more positive representation of women in advertisements, men have faced an identity crisis due to the conflicting demands aimed at them ever since. An Australian sociologist, Raven Kernel, has coined the term hegemonic masculinity, which describes a gender practice that legitimizes and guarantees male dominance in society. It favors currently the idealized markers of masculinity, which set expectations for both men and women to live up to. Studies into masculinity have identified that, despite their status as the privileged sex, men also suffer from limiting and stereotypical prescriptions on what it means to be a real man. Moreover, with the flux of changing gender roles, confusion has arisen in terms of what is expected from real men.
This section presents methods of analysis and the data collected for this study. We employed a multimodal approach, which combines visual analysis, discourse analysis, and a corpus-assisted analysis of the corpus of contemporary American English, COCA. The core analysis involved in our research is the analysis of the discursive techniques employed in the representation of masculinity in a selection of advertising campaigns. The COCA analysis is a supportive analysis of the typical context in which the collocation real man occurs. Our study thus combines both quantitative and qualitative data evaluation and aims to determine correlations between language and advertising. Table 1 provides information on the data collected. This sample consists of 50 posters that have been published in print media and presented in public outdoor spaces. The campaigns in question were launched between 1999 and 2022. The posters were designed for an English-speaking audience, so the brands are mainly UK or US based, with a few exceptions from Italy, France, and Germany. The only language used in all of the selected advertisements is English. The chosen posters advertise products targeted at men, which fit into 5 major categories: beverages, food, daily care products, male fragrances, and clothing. Among the brands advertised are American Apparel, Coca-Cola, Diesel, Dove, Gucci, Givenchy, Nivea, and KFC. Finally, the bottom row lists the 5 strategies that were identified as recurrent in the representation of masculinity and will be discussed in more detail in a few minutes. The corpus-assisted analysis aims to identify the contexts in which the term real man typically occurs, which intends to lay the empirical foundation for the evaluation of the connection between US English and the selected advertising campaigns. The COCA returns 1,699 matches for the lemma real man. The high frequency of the term shows the presence of the concept of real man in US English, and thus highlights the significance of the present research. Table 2 lists the 10 most frequent verbal collocates of the lemma real man, within a span of ±5 on the left and on the right. 494 concordances were subjected to a close reading in order to identify the typical context in which the term real man occurs. Not all of these verbs are direct collocates, but they do still reflect the general meaning of the term. The lemma real man does not always function as a subject, but also serves as an object. The most typical verbal collocates include the verbs need, know, want, take, and like. The first 10 collocates of real man can be linked to the 5 strategies that were identified in the posters. However, there are noticeable quantitative variations, and the term has a stronger connection to sex and women than to the other strategies. There were 32 contexts connected with sex, which corresponds to the identified discursive strategies, sex appeal, and sex and dominance. 21 contexts relate to the concept of male strength, while 13 can be assigned to the realm of gender equality and fatherhood. The least frequently employed strategy was gentleman look, with only 4 contexts in the COCA. In order to analyze the significance of the most frequent verbal collocates, it is essential to first examine their broader contexts. As we already mentioned, 32 of the contexts identified here can be directly or indirectly linked to the strategies of sex appeal and sexual dominance over women. Most of them directly refer to sexual encounters with women, as you can see in examples 1, 2, and 3 from Table 3. For instance, example 1, real man always wants sex, and example 3, you need a real man, honey. The examples illustrate how real men can function as sexual subjects as well as objects, by either playing a rather dominant role or by taking in a comparatively subordinate position. Other examples extend beyond these concepts and involve more provocative and erotic wording, where male figures dominate over women. Consider examples 4, 5, and 6. Examples 7, 8, and 9 illustrate the concept of male strength by referring to the ability to fight or protect, as well as a toned physical appearance and a proficiency in and knowledge of sports. These examples likewise demonstrate how dilemma real men can either function as a dominant subject or as an inferior object. Example 8. I only chat with real men who know how to play sports. The analysis also contains 13 references to gender equality, especially to a man's responsibility for his family and household. Example 11 illustrates a real man's role as a father figure. Example 11. Any man can be a father, but it takes a real man to be a daddy. Finally, there are only 4 concordances of real men looking and acting like gentlemen. Consider example 13. Oh, he's an elderly southern gentleman, you know, a real man's man, drinking, chain-smoking, plain talking. Please consider further examples from Table 3.
Now we are going to look at 5 strategies that we have identified in our sample of advertisements. Promoting masculinity within advertising also means emphasizing male strength and power. The strategy of strength was identified in 16 of the 50 analyzed posters. Importantly, strength as a concept is presented both visually and verbally. For example, in the slogans and brands names as in Fight Dirt, Wash Black, The Strong Beer for Real Men, Get in the Game, and Milk for Real Men. As for the looks, male models are typically tall, fit, muscular, and sporty, or even sportsmen. For example, the American football players who are featured in the Coca-Cola and Clinique posters. Significantly, male strength and power are closely interrelated with the concepts of fatherhood and relationships. The Dove poster cultivates an image of a strong father, both verbally and visually. A man is holding up a baby while lying on a couch, while the slogan says, "Look strong, feel strong, be strong." The American football player in the Clinique ad stands in stark contrast to the girl in a neat white dress who is depicted as a housewife holding a cake within a domestic setting, which reinforces the reproduction of stereotypical gender roles. Masculinity is often associated with sex appeal. This strategy was identified in 18 of the 15 analyzed posters, which makes it the most frequent strategy identified in the analyzed sample. As for the appearance, the male models are almost always topless and have well-developed muscular bodies, as illustrated in the Coca-Cola posters. In the Kraft poster, food is associated with lust and sexuality. When women are featured in the posters, the men are portrayed as passionate and lustful, as in the Job sport ad that depicts a topless, toned man looking up in between a woman's legs with the slogan reading, "Real men score." We can see the man's face, but only the legs and bottom of the woman are visible. Her face and upper body are cut out. Such a representation, the emphasis on the lower body, confirms the strategy of objectification of female models. Women are depicted as sex objects and portrayed as passive and submissive. The strategy of sexual appeal correlates with Goffman's concepts of ritualization of subordination and relative size. The strategy of sex appeal frequently overlaps with the strategy of sex and dominance, which we will discuss next. The strategy of sex and dominance was identified in 17 out of 50 cases. These posters provide concurrent depictions of male and female models. The male models are portrayed as active and dominant, while the female models are represented as passive and submissive, yet hyperfeminine, which reinforces the objectification and sexualization of women. Most of the posters are associated with aggressive and violent sexual acts. This is evident in the Sean John's Man's Fragrance poster. The word passion is stressed in the slogan. The background and the whole setting suggest a sexual tone. The Dolce & Gabbana poster even seems to imply a gang rape, as it depicts three men looking at a woman in a very short black dress and high heels lying on the floor, and another man seductively leaning over her. These ads portray women's subordination and submission. Male dominance is vividly visually expressed, with the male models put in a superior position and in control of the act. The strategy of gentleman look was identified in only 5 of the 50 posters. The male models are typically good-looking, classy, posh, neat, and sometimes mysterious, often wearing a suit. What's more, this strategy often employs so-called role models, such as actors, celebrities, or characters such as James Bond, as you can see in the Coca-Cola poster, depicting a gentleman wearing a tuxedo and standing next to the Coca-Cola bottle. Goffman's concepts relative size and ritualization of subordination, especially in relation to traditional gender roles, are evident in the Givenchy poster that depicts a gentleman holding an umbrella above a woman. Such an image implies some degree of dependency on the part of the woman. This dependency is also evident in the fact that a woman being as attracted to the advertised product that targets male audience. The man is depicted as a controlling force and the woman is portrayed as dependent on his gentlemanly allure. Finally, 5 of the 50 advertisements represent the concepts of fatherhood and gender equality. These ads are mainly situated within domestic settings and represent men as caring fathers and helping with the household. However, what seems striking is the image of a sexy house husband depicted in the Pinnacle vodka poster who is ironing topless. The idea of shared household responsibilities is overshadowed by the strategy of sex appeal, which we discussed earlier. This overlap of strategies puts an image of a man with a well-developed body at the forefront. All in all, the study shows that in 27 out of 50 posters, the male models are topless, which further reinforces the idea of men as sex symbols. The portrayal of women has been identified as extremely stereotypical. The advertisements showcase sexualized images of women underlined by lust, temptation, and seduction.
In conclusion, our study has provided a multidimensional analysis of the discursive strategies employed in the reproduction of gender roles through advertising. The analysis of the most typical discursive strategies shows that advertising continues to promote traditional gender stereotypes rather than representing a more natural diversity of gender expression. The analysis of the Coca complemented the findings of the discourse and visual analysis, namely in identifying the most typical context in which the collocation real man occurs in US English. This corpus-assisted analysis supports the general findings of the study and shows that language and advertising operate in a distinct circular structure and mutually impact one another to a certain extent. We conclude that unattainable archetypes of femininity and masculinity are often propagated as the norm in advertising. Stakeholders should be called upon to challenge these stereotypes and present us with a new normal. Here you can see a selection of references used in our study. Thank you very much for your attention. We look forward to your feedback, questions, and insightful discussion.